Hello and welcome to my presentation with the title Risk-Based Data Anonymization for Medical Research. My name is Fabian Prasser and I'm a professor of medical informatics at the Berlin Institute of Health at Charité Universitätsmedizin Berlin. Data sharing is an important topic in medical research. It is critical for collaborative data-driven research approaches where data is shared across institutional boundaries. Examples include the area of precision medicine, where high case numbers and detailed characterizations are needed, or the area of real-world evidence generation, where access to large clinical routine datasets is required. Moreover, funding agencies increasingly aim to improve the transparency, reproducibility, and reusability of research results and research data, with policies requiring data obtained with public funding to be shared with the scientific community. There is also evidence that data sharing has additional benefits, such as higher citation rates. If there is no exemption in the law that permits the sharing of data in a specific context, either informed consent needs to be obtained, which is difficult in retrospect, or data needs to be anonymized. But what does this actually mean, and what is anonymous data? So the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR for short, applies to personal data. And anonymous data is data that can be generated from personal data to which the law doesn't apply. This means that to understand anonymous data, we need to understand personal data, and in Recital 26, the GDPR provides a definition. So according to Recital 26, personal data is any information concerning an identified or identifiable person. And to determine whether a person is identifiable, we need to take into account all the means that are reasonably likely to be used for identification. This is important as it justifies risk-based approaches to anonymization, because identification has to do with likelihoods, and likelihoods are an important aspect of risk. Recital 26 goes on to say that likelihoods are to be determined based on objective factors, and also mentions a few examples such as the costs or the amount of time required. Let us switch from the legal to the technical perspective. On this slide you can see a simple example of a technical anonymization process. The input dataset is shown at the top and the output dataset is shown at the bottom. As you can see, there is a range of operations that can be used to anonymize data. In this example, we have taken a random sample of the input dataset, we have aggregated the values of the attribute age, we have suppressed some values of the attribute sex, we have applied a masking operation to the zip code, we have categorized the values of the attribute weight into intervals, and we have generalized the diagnoses using the hierarchical structure of the ICD terminology. The output dataset fulfills two well-known formal privacy models. First, the dataset fulfills k-anonymity with k equals 3, which corresponds to a likelihood of not more than 33% of correct linkage of an identified person to the corresponding record. Second, under the assumption that the transformations have been applied in a data-independent manner, the transformation process also fulfills a more modern model called differential privacy, which has somewhat complex semantics but offers even stronger protection. What we can also see from this example is that anonymization can have a significant impact on the statistical properties of a dataset, potentially leading to bias in scientific analysis. This brings us to a central property of data anonymization, which is when only looking at a dataset itself, there is an inherent trade-off between the degree of anonymity or the reduction in likelihood of identification that can be achieved and its scientific usefulness. On this slide, you can see an abstract depiction of this inherent trade-off. In an ideal world, we would be able to share all data in its original form without any risks. However, this is typically not possible. Instead, we need to navigate the so-called risk-utility curve by applying transformations to the data. In this process, we need to be careful to not focus too much on the risk reduction side, because this may lead to bad science, but to also not focus too much on the scientific side, because this will mean breaking the law. The selection and configuration of an anonymization process will determine how the curve looks like and how good the trade-off is that we can achieve. One important aspect is the selection of a model for measuring risks, which needs to consider the context in which data is being shared. One important aspect of context is the data itself. For example, you might want to focus on facial features in images, the occurrence of certain tokens in clinical texts, and cell counts in statistical tables. There are also different approaches with which common models, for example based on uniqueness, can be applied to different types of data. The goals of an anticipated adversary can also form an important aspect of context. 3 models that have been proposed for this are the marketer, which aims to identify as many individuals as possible on average, but doesn't care about the correctness of individual guesses, for example for sending out targeted spam messages. The journalist, which tries to identify any individual to be able to write a newspaper article, and the prosecutor, which aims to identify the specific record of a specific individual in a dataset. In summary, this means that in order to achieve a good trade-off between risk reduction and scientific usefulness, we need to make assumptions that describe the context in which data is being shared. But how do we make sure that our assumptions hold? We can do this by looking beyond the anonymization process itself and also controlling the context in which data is being shared. One handy approach to design such solutions is the so-called 5 safes framework. It specifies different axes along which the context can be controlled to reduce risks. With safe people, we can ensure that only trustworthy researchers are using the data. This can, for example, not be achieved when data is shared as an open dataset on the internet, but requires some form of access control. With safe projects, we can ensure that data is only used for adequate purposes. This can, for example, be achieved by requiring IRB approval. There are also 3 technical axes. With safe data, we can reason about the risks of identification that are inherent to a dataset. This is the most important axis for the application of anonymization techniques. With safe settings, we can reason about protection measures that are in effect while data is being used, for example, a monitored remote desktop connection. Finally, with safe outputs, we can reason about risks of identifiability that might be inherent to the results of an analysis, which is also an aspect where anonymization processes can be important. Going back to the risk-utility curve, the effect of additional safeguards can be visualized by basically shifting the curve to the right, allowing for much higher scientific usefulness with very little changes to the data, while at the same time significantly reducing the likelihood of identification. Let us now turn our attention towards the tool support for the anonymization part of such a multi-layered data sharing procedure. In order to put risk-based anonymization into practice, a tool needs to be able to support a wide variety of models for measuring and quantifying risks, and it also needs to be highly scalable. The landscape of mature and open tools for this purpose is surprisingly small, and here at the Berlin Institute of Health we are driving the development of one such solution that I would like to present in further detail. ARX is a cross-platform anonymization tool which has been under constant development since 2012 and which has been downloaded more than 25,000 times. The software supports a much broader spectrum of methods than any comparable open source tool. For example, ARX supports more than 15 different models for quantifying risks. These include well-known models such as k-anonymity, but also statistical models based on population estimates and state-of-the-art methods such as game-theoretic approaches and differential privacy. To reduce risks, ARX currently supports more than 10 different transformation methods, including various ways of data generalization, top and bottom coding, suppression, sampling, and the aggregation of numeric variables. Finally, to support a semi-automated approach for trading off risks and usefulness, ARX supports several optimization algorithms that can use more than 10 different models for quantifying the utility of data, including general-purpose methods reflecting data fidelity or changes to value distributions, as well as application-specific models, for example, for creating privacy-preserving machine learning models. ARX is available in different flavors, and on this slide you can see screenshots of its graphical front end. There are dedicated perspectives for loading datasets and configuring the anonymization process, for exploring the space of potential solutions to an anonymization problem, for analyzing risks and residual risks, as well as for analyzing the scientific usefulness of output data. In addition to this, there is a range of wizards, for example for generating dataset-specific transformation rules. More information on ARX features and a link to our code repository can be found on the project website. ARX is used on a global scale. This slide shows that the software is mentioned in guidelines and reports from authorities from a range of countries. Examples include a report by the Finnish Ministry of Transformation and Communication, the Polish Ministry of Research and Education, an implementation guideline by the European Medicines Agency, and reports from the French Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, as well as the Dutch Ministry of Justice and Security. ARX has also been integrated into several commercial products, for example to extend big data processing platforms with anonymization capabilities, and it is used in several training and education programs. In the last couple of slides I would like to present you an application example where we have developed a data anonymization pipeline for an open source registry on COVID-19. LEOSS is a European registry capturing the clinical course of SARS-CoV-2 infected patients that has been established at the University of Cologne. To enable generating evidence at the rapid pace needed in a pandemic, it implements a special approach. Cases are documented without any directly identifying information and only once and retrospectively after discharge or death. Hence, no informed consent is necessary, and all hospitalized patients, including children, are eligible. For scientific dissemination, LEOSS implements an open science approach. The registry is hosted in a secure environment in Cologne, and anonymous data is shared with researchers and the public. For this purpose, additional anonymization procedures are applied on a case-by-case basis. To implement these anonymization procedures, we have applied qualitative as well as quantitative risk assessments followed by formal anonymization. As part of the risk assessment procedure, we compared the variables in the dataset to risky variables mentioned in laws and guidelines. In addition to that, we performed a context-specific assessment of the risk of identification associated with each and every variable, considering properties such as the replicability, availability, and distinguishability of their values. From the results of this assessment, we derived an anonymization procedure based on formal risk models and the opinion on anonymization methods by the Article 29 Data Protection Working Party. The opinion states that data is to be protected from singling out, which is the possibility to isolate some or all records which identify an individual, linkability, which is the ability to link at least two records concerning the same individual or a group of individuals, and inference, which is the possibility to deduce with significant probability the value of an attribute from the values of a set of other attributes. We also took particular care to design the anonymization process in a manner that anonymity is not broken even if data is published continuously and repeatedly, for example via the LEOSS website. This slide provides an overview of how the anonymous datasets created for the LEOSS registry differ from the original data that is being stored. By carefully tailoring the anonymization processes to the contexts in which data is being shared, we were able to generate anonymous datasets with only very minor differences to the original dataset. This is exemplified here by frequency distributions. With this, I would like to conclude my talk. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions.